When you think of scorpions, you picture tiny desert nightmares hiding under rocks with their little stingers. But that's child's play when compared to the sea scorpions that roamed ancient oceans. These armored freaks of nature grew massive, ruled shallow seas, and hunted like the alien in the Predator movie. But how big were sea scorpions and what really made them so terrifying? To begin with, we have to look at their giant bodies, which were built for nothing but violence. Sea scorpions, formerly known as eurypterids, were so huge that they made land scorpions look like toy props. Some species grew as much as 8 feet long, about 2.4 meters, which is pretty scary when you think about it. Most grown adult humans don't even grow up to that length. And no, that length didn't come with any form of elegance. Their bodies were not so pretty, thick, heavy, and downright intimidating. Instead of sleek shapes, they looked like floating armored furniture with anger issues. But don't think they were sluggish just because they were huge and heavy. On the contrary, water actually supports their weight. As a result, evolution kept pushing them toward even bigger and bolder designs. Their bodies were wide and flat, helping them move silently along ancient seabeds. This shape allowed sudden upward lunges that startled prey before they could come up with an escape plan. And while land scorpions relied on speed, sea scorpions preferred overwhelming presence to scare and devour whatever they decided to eat for dinner. Heavy armor plates covered their backs, offering not only protection, but a major confidence boost. Those plates overlapped neatly, giving flexibility without sacrificing serious defense. So yes, sea scorpions moved smoothly while wearing what looked like medieval battle gear. Now, predators with armor tend to act bolder, and sea scorpions proved that. Their large front claws dominated their bodies and immediately signaled terrible intentions. These claws were meant for crushing prey, not politely testing whether the food was edible. Water resistance amplified their strikes, adding extra force with every snap. And once those claws closed, prey usually accepted their fate rather quickly. Well, because they really had no other choice. On land, scorpions sting and wait patiently for venom results. But underwater, sea scorpions grab first and ask no questions afterward. Their claws drag victims across the seabed like unpaid baggage. And escape became nearly impossible, especially within shallow coastal environments. Shallow seas limited vertical movement, which trapped prey in panic loops. Meanwhile, warm, salty waters encouraged faster growth and constant aggression. Luckily for sea scorpions, they had more than enough food to eat, which meant there was no reason for these animals to stay small. And as generations passed, size became a winning strategy without obvious drawbacks. Soon, entire coastlines felt crowded whenever these giants cruised nearby. Smaller animals learned quickly that hiding became a full-time job. Even early fish likely developed armor, partly because of these monsters. It is also worth mentioning that visibility was poor in warm, shallow waters filled with sediment clouds. That means you often notice sea scorpions after you've already started panicking. Can you imagine swimming and watching a huge clawed shadow block the sunlight without any warning? That's the type of stuff you see in sci-fi movies. No jokes, your instincts would scream danger long before you figured out what this creature was. If you were ever caught in such a situation, I doubt you'd consider fighting, being brave, or coming up with clever escape plans. Nope. You'd rather freeze and hope it somehow misses you. But if they're hungry, I doubt they would. Their size dominated space, forcing everything nearby to adjust behavior. They were so destructive that other predators gave them distance, because conflict with a sea scorpion never ended well. Over time, ecosystems bent around their physical dominance completely. Evolution rewarded bigger bodies, thicker armor, and stronger claws. And nothing about their design suggested balance or peaceful coexistence. Rather than coexist like friendly neighbors, they just eat whatever comes their way to say hi. Sea scorpions existed to control space and remove anything inconvenient. Even calm movement stirred sediment, which helped to hide them until the very last moment. That constant uncertainty stressed their prey continuously, and that stress alone reshaped feeding patterns and migration routes. So as you can see, sea scorpions didn't simply hunt, they reshaped environments. Their bodies became moving threats that changed how life behaved nearby. And thanks to their terrifying weapons, there was hardly any prey that could survive a sea attack. Speaking of their weapons, sea scorpions had tools that made the stingers on land scorpions look cute. Of course, size alone wasn't enough, so sea scorpions needed serious weapons if they were going to remain dominant. Their long, muscular tails ended with sharp, curved spikes built for damage. These spikes were about 12 inches long, and that's roughly 30 centimeters. And while scientists aren't too sure if these spikes were loaded with venom, stabbing alone solved most problems efficiently. A single thrust could pierce armored fish or softer prey instantly. But unlike land scorpions, they did not rely on slow chemical reactions. That would have been boring for these gigantic creatures. Instead, they relied on physics, muscle power, and terrifying accuracy that signaled game over. Water buoyancy also supported their massive bodies during powerful tail strikes. That support allowed slower movements packed with overwhelming force. Their tails flexed using thick muscles, not quick flicks. Every swing carried weight, momentum, and extremely bad intentions. Once struck, prey lost blood quickly and weakened fast underwater. Underwater panic also burned energy quickly, making escape attempts short-lived. Some species even had serrated spike edges for extra injury. That meant struggling actually increased damage, which feels deeply unfair. Shallow seas made danger constant by limiting escape directions. Prey couldn't dive deeper or launch away safely, so every movement risked sudden impalement from behind. But it wasn't just the tail and spike, because their massive claws were weapons of destruction too. They pinned prey using these claws while stabbing with precision. That teamwork between the tail and claws turned survival into wishful thinking very quickly. Simply put, sea scorpions existed to injure, kill, and maintain control. They weren't here to make friends. It got so bad that over time, fear became baked into ecosystem behavior patterns. Prey species adapted by hiding, developing harder shells, or simply relocating to a new neighborhood. These creatures forced evolution through violence and pressure. If their claws failed briefly, their tails finished the problem quickly. So with bodily weapons as powerful as their tails and claws, what was on the menu for sea scorpions? You'd be shocked to learn about their feeding habits, because it was nothing short of horrific. Let me just tell you straight up, sea scorpions were not picky eaters, which means practically anything that could fit into their belly was either going to be breakfast, lunch, or dinner. They hunted fish, worms, trilobites, and anything else foolish enough to exist nearby. If it moved, crawled, or swam slowly, it probably ended up on the menu. That menu stayed flexible because survival underwater rewards zero emotional attachment. Instead of chasing delicately, sea scorpions relied on sudden, overwhelming force. They grabbed prey using their massive claws built for holding things permanently. And once those claws closed, negotiations officially ended without further discussion. From there, victims got dragged toward mouth parts hidden underneath their body. This mouth placement alone feels like nature intentionally choosing horror over comedy. Their mouths face downward, forcing prey into hard, grinding plates. These plates crush shells, bones, and dignity all at once. Now brace yourself for this, but fossil evidence suggests food processing sometimes happened while the prey was still alive. Yes, that means their meals occasionally screamed and fought back uselessly. This is unlike land scorpions who inject venom and wait patiently like polite monsters. Sea scorpions skipped patience and went straight into aggressive eating. That immediate feeding spelled violent thrashing throughout the surrounding water. But trashing only stirred sediment clouds, reducing visibility even further. Of course, low visibility helped sea scorpions stay hidden while finishing meals. Unfortunately, thrashing also attracted other predators, hoping for easy leftovers. And as a result, feeding scenes quickly turned into underwater chaos. Ancient reefs became crowded dining areas filled with panic and blood. Instead of peaceful coral neighborhoods, reefs hosted non-stop feeding violence. Murky water already reduced visibility, giving hunters a huge advantage. Prey rarely saw attacks coming until claws wrapped around their bodies like blankets in the cold winter. Once dragged beneath armored plates, movement became extremely limited. Those plates blocked leverage, airflow, and any clever escape attempts. Meanwhile, predators gathered nearby, watching the chaos unfold patiently. Feeding events often triggered chain reactions of additional attacks. One meal could lead to several deaths within minutes. This transformed feeding into ecosystem-wide destruction rather than isolated events. Without being told, smaller animals later learned to avoid feeding zones entirely. Unfortunately, those zones expanded constantly as sea scorpions multiplied. These guys didn't eat politely or quickly like nervous predators. They ate thoroughly, leaving little behind for scavengers, and that efficiency pressured prey populations non-stop. As I mentioned before, this pressure reshaped entire food webs. Some species developed thicker armor to survive attacks slightly longer, while others developed faster escape reflexes that rarely helped enough. To make matters even worse, warm, shallow waters boosted metabolism, and higher metabolism meant sea scorpions needed frequent meals. Frequent meals meant frequent hunting, and frequent hunting meant constant fear. Reefs never truly rested from predation pressure. Even nighttime offered limited safety because visibility already stayed terrible. Sea scorpions handled darkness extremely well, using touch and vibration. That meant prey couldn't even hide in the dark. They just couldn't catch a break, and the way sea scorpions ate shaped daily movement patterns across ancient seas. Prey fed quickly, hid constantly, or migrated away entirely. Some species likely changed feeding times to avoid peak danger. Unfortunately for them, though, sea scorpions adapted just as quickly. Feeding habits alone made these animals living nightmares. But what do sea scorpions do after eating a large, delicious meal? They reproduce, of course. Now, you might expect reproduction to calm sea scorpions down briefly. Instead, breeding seasons turned oceans into competitive danger festivals. According to research, sea scorpions likely gathered in shallow waters to mate seasonally. These gatherings concentrated massive predators into tight spaces, and crowding alone increased tension immediately among adults. As expected, aggression spiked fast and stayed high. Males likely used claws to wrestle rivals aggressively, and those claws caused serious injuries during brutal contests. Winning meant access to mates and safer territory, but losing meant injuries, retreat, or becoming lunch. These battles added extra violence to already dangerous waters. Meanwhile, eggs laid in protected areas attracted predators constantly. Eggs were easy nutrition, so threats appeared frequently. Adults responded by defending breeding zones fiercely. Anything approaching risked sudden attacks without warning. This defensive behavior turned calm lagoons into temporary death traps. Because unlike land scorpions who hide offspring quietly under rocks, sea scorpions did the opposite and dominated open spaces loudly. Their size discouraged many potential egg predators immediately. Still, constant defense required constant aggression. That aggression spilled into surrounding waters quickly. Nearby animals avoided breeding zones completely when possible, simply because sticking around was a bad idea. Young sea scorpions hatched into crowded, hostile environments. They grew fast because slow growth meant death. However, fast growth demanded constant feeding from day one. And crowded waters increased competition among juveniles quickly. So when food dropped, cannibalism became the next option. Yes, sometimes siblings became snacks without apology. Now that's the true definition of sibling rivalry. Since warm, shallow seas encourage faster growth and constant movement, higher activity increased encounters and accidental confrontations. Breeding seasons amplified danger far beyond normal levels, and entire coastlines became seasonal danger zones for smaller animals. Prey learned to recognize breeding seasons instinctively. Many species fled affected areas temporarily each year, and those migrations reshaped ecosystems far beyond breeding sites. So you see, sea scorpions indirectly controlled animal movement through fear alone. Now, successful breeding increased populations steadily over time, and growing populations pushed sea scorpions into new territories. Though I'm sure the existing residents of those new territories didn't appreciate sea scorpions moving into their neighborhood. And as if that wasn't bad enough, each generation of sea scorpions inherited aggressive traits that improved survival. Calmer individuals rarely survived long enough to reproduce, and that selection pressure rewarded violence consistently. Over millions of years, aggression became standard behavior. Breeding was not brief, gentle, or private. It reshaped entire regions repeatedly and predictably. Season after season, danger returned like a bad tradition. Smaller animals feared certain months instinctively. Even large predators treated breeding zones cautiously. Without a doubt, sea scorpions turned reproduction into another survival weapon, because their life cycle ensured danger spread everywhere water allowed. This brings us to how well these guys could adapt and thrive. Sea scorpions succeeded because they adapted like nature's most aggressive problem solvers. Unlike picky animals, they thrived in saltwater, brackish water, and even freshwater environments. That flexibility immediately gave them access to far more territory than most predators. While other species stayed loyal to one habitat, sea scorpions said yes to everything wet. Fossils found in rivers hundreds of miles inland, about 320 kilometers, prove this clearly. That discovery shocked scientists because oceans were no longer their only playground. Instead, rivers became bonus hunting zones filled with unfamiliar, unprepared prey. Freshwater fish had zero experience dealing with armored ocean monsters, so naturally survival odds dropped quickly for anything sharing water with them. This adaptability massively expanded their hunting grounds across ancient continents. Land scorpions struggle outside deserts, but sea scorpions invaded everything containing water. Deserts limit movement, but water connects ecosystems beautifully. Sea scorpions use those connections like underwater highways for conquest. Shallow seas flowed into estuaries, which flowed into rivers and deltas. That connectivity allowed effortless movement between hunting zones. As a result, prey never truly escaped by relocating. It is also worth mentioning that their gills handled oxygen changes better than many ancient fish species. That meant oxygen in poor waters did not slow them down much. Stagnant swamps and muddy rivers became viable homes. So while fish struggled, sea scorpions kept breathing comfortably. This respiratory advantage gave them access to overlooked environments. And overlooked environments usually contain easy, delicious meals. Flexible diets also boosted their survival during climate changes. They ate fish, worms, arthropods, and basically anything edible they could get their claws on. When one food source disappeared, they simply switched menus like they were in an uptown restaurant. That flexibility mattered during shifting climates and habitat changes. Ice age cycles barely slowed their expansion across ancient continents. And as the sea rose and fell, they adjusted without much complaint. As for cold periods, well, that pushed them into hiding, but not extinction. Warm periods, on the other hand, allowed rapid population growth and territorial spread. Few predators challenged them during their peak dominance. Their large size, armor, and weapons discouraged most competitors immediately. Even top predators preferred easier meals elsewhere. And that lack of pressure allowed populations to stabilize and expand. With their numbers came ecosystem influence and serious fear. Sea scorpions shaped entire ecosystems through population control. Prey species declined or adapted under constant predation pressure, even though they didn't sign up for it, and that pressure reshaped food webs permanently. Imagine an animal that thrives wherever water flows. That adaptability explains why they appeared almost everywhere fossils exist. They ruled shallow seas, river deltas, estuaries, and inland waterways. No single environment defined them or limited their success. That made them incredibly resilient predators over millions of years. However, adaptability does not guarantee eternal survival. Eventually, even the most dominant species face changing conditions. But extinction did not erase their terrifying legacy, though. It does raise an uncomfortable question about their disappearance. So how exactly did sea scorpions go extinct? The answer involves competition, environmental shifts, and unlucky timing. As fish evolved better jaws and mobility, competition increased sharply. New predators emerged that challenged sea scorpions directly. At the same time, habitats changed faster than before. Shallow seas shrank during continental shifts and climate cooling. Oxygen levels fluctuated, stressing even adaptable gill systems. Food webs also got reorganized, reducing available prey for them to eat. Reproduction also suffered under increasing environmental instability. Meanwhile, faster fish outcompeted juveniles for food. And gradually, population numbers declined region by region. Extinction happened, but it happened slowly, not through dramatic catastrophe. Sea scorpions faded as ecosystems outgrew their dominance. Still, their legacy remains terrifyingly impressive. They ruled longer than many famous predators ever did, and their fossils remind us that the waters once hosted true monsters. And while it feels comforting to know that they no longer patrol rivers today, you can't help but stare into the water on your next canoe cruise. Because why not? One might just spring out of the water in search of a meal. I'm just kidding, but that's how much sea scorpions can strike fear in our hearts. Yeah, they vanished hundreds of millions of years ago, but somehow we just can't forget about them. In case you didn't know, fear doesn't care about timelines, logic, or extinction certificates. The idea of them alone makes oceans feel slightly less friendly. These monsters hit a rare fear combination that modern animals rarely match. They were huge, armored, aggressive, and lived in environments humans fear naturally. People already hate deep water, murky water, and unseen movement below surfaces. And sea scorpions lived exactly where fear feels most comfortable growing. Unlike sharks or crocodiles, sea scorpions looked completely alien. No jokes. They looked like one of those monsters in an outer space Hollywood flick. They did not resemble fish, mammals, or reptiles that humans understand instinctively. They looked like armored nightmares assembled from spare parts. That unfamiliar shape triggers fear faster than familiar predators ever could. Their segmented bodies moved with mechanical confidence, not graceful animal motion. That movement would have felt wrong to watch, even for ancient creatures. And we already know that we fear things that move in ways we cannot predict. Sea scorpions could crawl, swim, lunge, and pivot without warning. That versatility made them feel less like animals and more like machines. Well, machines with claws, spikes, and terrible intentions. But another reason they are so terrifying is their position on the food web. Sea scorpions were not specialists with narrow diets. They were opportunists that attacked whatever fit into their grasp. That makes them scarier than predators with specific prey preferences. If something moved and looked edible, it probably qualified for a snack. They also existed during a time when ecosystems lacked balance. Predator-prey relationships had not stabilized yet. That allowed extreme traits to flourish without immediate consequences. Sea scorpions also benefited massively from that evolutionary chaos. They became oversized, overpowered, and under-challenged. Nothing stepped in early enough to keep them in check. So their extinction does not make them less frightening. In fact, extinction adds mystery, which always boosts fear. We only know them through fossils and educated guesses. Gaps in knowledge let our imaginations run wild, and imagination always escalates horror. Even with their fossils, we can't say enough about how terrifying these creatures were. You know why? Because fossils rarely preserve calm behavior. They preserve conflict, damage, and violence instead. That alone creates a permanent highlight reel of terror. Another unsettling factor involves how long they dominated. Sea scorpions ruled aquatic environments for over 200 million years. That is an absurdly long time to remain successful predators. Because if life was a championship, they held the heavyweight belt for probably the longest time. Dinosaurs were scary, but they had competition everywhere. Sea scorpions usually did not. They occupied top predator roles across multiple environments over extended periods. If something was ever going to follow you from oceans into rivers, it was likely a sea scorpion. And that adds even more chills to their name. Their adaptability makes them feel like rule breakers. And rule-breaking predators always scare people more. They also challenge a comforting belief about progress. We like thinking evolution always improves outcomes. However, sea scorpions suggest evolution sometimes creates nightmares instead. Their existence proves size and aggression can succeed spectacularly. That realization makes extinction feel like luck, not inevitability. Can you imagine an 8-feet-long underwater creature trying to grab you? That's as insane as it is scary. Because even though the regular-sized scorpions we know aren't exactly friendly, I'm sure we'd rather have them around than sea scorpions. And why not? Regular scorpions are poisonous, but they don't stand a chance when you stomp them with your work boots. And hey, I'm not saying you should, because poison is still very dangerous. But you get the point. To sum it up, sea scorpions represent a lost world humans today never got the chance to experience. That unknown past feels threatening on its own. There's no video footage of them crushing prey with their claws or stabbing them to death with their tail spikes. There were no wildlife channels on cable then, so we have no clear visuals of how devastating they were. All we have is fossil evidence that tells us exactly what these guys were up to. But guess what? It's probably a good thing they didn't exist in our time, because even though they are extinct, sea scorpions still swim through human fear effortlessly. All you have to do is imagine being in the river with one or two of them lurking around. That should do the trick. Subscribe to the channel and we'll see you in the next one.